And then I realized that this dish was originally Indian, and it traveled obviously to England. It's quite obvious how, the Anglo-Indian elite that then settled in England in my childhood, in my boyhood, in our home in Iraq, we had every Thursday we had for dinner a dish called khichdi, and this khichdi was basically rice and lentils cooked with some tomato paste, and then you fried garlic and cumin in lots of butter or ghee and poured it into the boiled rice and lentils and let them cook together. And then you ate it with yogurt as a sauce, and sometimes with fried cheese on top, and with some people also fried egg on top. So it was a kind of non-meat dish. And that was one of my favorite dishes, and I loved the smell, the aroma of garlic and cumin frying that went with it. And so I remember that very well. And then when I came to England and discovered Indian restaurants, I discovered they had khichdi. Some had actually a dish called khichdi, which was quite similar, rice and lentils with other spices. And then I discovered a kind of upper class English breakfast dish called khichdi, which was rice also, but without lentils, but with smoked fish into it. And then I realized that this dish was originally Indian, and it traveled obviously to England. It's quite obvious how, the Anglo-Indian elite that then settled in England had an adaptation of that dish with its name. But then what was really amazing is when I went to Egypt, and even in the 1980s when I first went there, there was something called koshary, koshary, which was in the street. It was a street food, people on carts, and people would stop there and eat this koshary, which was also rice and lentils, with the addition of fried onions and shatta sauce, hot sauce and so on, and also macaroni. And so, I was fascinated by this. There's obviously had some connection with the Indian dish, but nobody in Egypt was aware of that. And when I mentioned it, they would reject that it came from has any connection with India. And so I said, well, what's the origin of the word, koshary? And there are all kinds of theories, including one colleague, professor, telling me that it probably comes from the Jewish kosher, which is absurd. Anyway, then I investigated how it may have got there. And then I found, after all kinds of dead alleys, I discovered a footnote in a book by Richard Burton, the English traveler who pretended to be a Muslim doctor and traveled to Mecca and Medina and wrote a book about his travels in Mecca and Medina. And in a footnote, he says that in Suez, this is late 19th century, they were eating this al-khichdi, or breakfast. And then he says, well, he knew it was Indian. He says, well, how did it get there? And he realizes that it was carried there by the pilgrimage trade, from India into Hijaz, and from also into Suez. And then it became a popular dish in Suez first, and obviously it then moved to Cairo. And then when did when did the macaroni go in? I don't know, but one theory is that the macaroni is cheaper than rice and lentils. And so, the main thing, seeing that initially it was a poor man's food,